Hi there, this is Lisa Norton from Material Girlfriends, and today we're working on the Autumn Month 2 Falling Leaves block. So this is a fun and easy block to do. We're going to be making one of the chocolate brown leaves, one of the wintry green leaves. You're going to make two of the autumn yellow leaves and one of the autumn green leaves. So the instructions start with the autumn green, so we're going to go ahead and start there. You're first going to draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on the wrong side of the light green square. Then you're going to pair it right sides together. If you can't tell which is the right side of the batik, it's not going to matter. But if you look at it and one of them seems to be slightly more faded, that would be the wrong side. But today I can't seem to tell a difference. So you're going to align it, and then you're going to sew 1/4 inch on each side of the drawn line. I'm going to do that real quick. Oops, let me get mine. There we go. So I've got a seam on each side of the drawn line, and now I'm going to cut it on the diagonal. I'm going to line my ruler up on that pencil line. And I've got 2 half square triangles. So I'll give them a quick press. We're going to press the seam to the dark side. And now we're going to trim these down to be 2.5 inch squares. So one of the products I like to recommend is a Block Lock ruler. And this is a Block Lock 2.5 inch half square triangle. And so it has a little groove on the back side, and it kind of locks into the groove. You can, if you were here, you'd be able to feel it, but it can slide back and forth on that seam. So you would line up the Block Lock ruler with your half square triangle and then trim off the excess. By the way, I like using small scissors for small cuts, big scissors for big cuts, small rotary blades for little cuts, and big rotary blades for big cuts. It just seems to help my accuracy. I'm going to turn that back around. What the Block Lock ruler does, it helps keep that seam directly corner to corner. So my seam is now perfectly aligned corner to corner and now 2.5 inches square. So this one, if you don't have a Block Lock ruler, you can use any of your squares. What you're going to do is you're going to find the diagonal line, the 45-degree line in your square, and you'll line it up on the diagonal line of the seam. I'm going to look for my 2.5 inch line, so that's this line here, and I'm going to make sure that it's within the square. And then when I have my diagonal line lined up with my seam, I can give that a quick cut. There. Spin that around. I'll find my 2.5 inch line, and I'll make sure that's lined up at the back side of my half square triangle. My seam's nice and lined up with that diagonal line, and then I can trim off the rest. There we go. So I have my half square triangles ready. So now we're going to make the stem. The stem for the leaf, you're going to start with the 2 1/4 inch light gray squares, and you're going to draw a diagonal from corner to corner on each one of those. You're going to take one of the 2 1/2 inch squares, and you're going to position the lighter gray square right there in the corner. See, we have extra green on the side, and now we're going to sew on that gray line, or on the pencil line. All right, now this will be pressed back. So I'll do that right now before I sew on my next piece. And now we'll take our other one and we'll position it in this corner. And I'm going to sew on that diagonal line, and you can already see how my stem is forming. There you go. Isn't that nice? Okay, so I'm going to give this one a quick little press. I'm going to use the side of my iron to make sure that there's no overlap. That looks quite nice. And I'm going to trim away that extra. So you can use your rotary cutter and your ruler, and you're going to trim 1/4 inch or so from that seam, but I'm just going to do it a quick scissor cut. There. Now my stem is ready. So now I can lay out my blocks. So I'm going to move my other lead pieces out of the way. So I'm going to lay my stem. I'm going to just need some 2 1/2 inch squares. And your half square triangles create the leaf portions. Oops. Yep, that's right. I need one more 2 1/2 inch square. That's going to be a pretty leaf. So the next step is that you're going to take your rows and you're going to sew them in rows. So I'll be sewing this row together, and this row together, and this row together. Now for accuracy, I like to tell people to ask yourself a question. What's the point? So the point for my next seam is I'm going to sew these two pieces together. My point is here. So you see I have my diagonal line? There really isn't a point that's going to be here, but right there. So I'm going to line up my square with my point. And if it's slightly long or short at the other end, it's not going to be as important as getting my point lined up. So now my point is going to be 1/4 inch from that edge. I think the seam gets pressed in this direction. So our next seam that we're going to do is for this one. The point is actually in this corner, not in this one. So I've got a point there. So I'm going to line up at that end. Now you see how this one, my square is slightly smaller. So as I line up at this corner, I'll try and ease that a little bit. But if I don't quite make it, that's okay. It's not going to be as drastic if it's short at that end as if it's the more important portion is at this end. So that's where we're going to line up, and that's where we're going to sew. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So our next row that we would sew would be this one. There are no points on this one, so it doesn't matter with the lineup. So if I was slightly short or long on either of those ends, I would just split the difference on this one, but they're lined up just right. And then with this one, when we're sewing these two pieces together, when you ask yourself, what's the point is right there. And so we'll line up those two pieces and begin there to sew. When we get down to this row, the point is here. So we're going to line up the block at this point and begin sewing at this direction. So I would just flip it over, make sure my corner is nicely lined up, and sew from that point. And the same when we get to here, the point is down here, and so this is where I would line it up and start sewing, and then do my best to ease because we've got another point down here. So this one's one of those double points. So you'll do your best to ease any differences for this one. I don't cut down my blocks unless the instructions tell me to cut them down, because if you cut them down, you're only making your pieces smaller. So follow directions if it tells you to cut it down or to square it to a certain size. But other than that, I don't trim off my pieces to make it especially flat. Like I would not go back and trim that off. I would just leave it because it's not going to make any difference in the long run. So there you go. It's an easy block to put together, and I hope my accuracy tips helped. And I will see you in the next video.